Rigby's Roads, Chapter 15. There are always hidden reasons. It was the day before the big trip. Jack had done his homework, getting maps and a triptych from AAA. It was 380 miles from his house to Sturgis, one way. He wasn't leading the group, but the AAA maps were for his own peace of mind. He went to the Harley dealership and had them put on a small windshield on the front of his bike. Red had suggested it because it keeps the bugs and rocks from hitting you, and it deflects the wind around your body so you don't have to fight to hold on at 75 miles an hour. Back at work, things became tense between Carl and Tompkins, and Carl decided to give him a week off to get his life back together. Jack was starting to tense up also, but for different reasons. His mind was on a ticket exchange for Yogi and the mysterious disappearing bag wanted by the FBI. He and Bonnie continued to work on finalizing the parks project. She saw that his mind kept wandering, so she tried a different approach. Jack, can we go for another ride in the mountains? I really need to get some fresh air. What do you say? Now? He was surprised to hear that from her, but he welcomed the escape. Yes, now. We can tell Carl it's a field trip to the Rocky Mountain National Park. It's a perfect excuse. Come on, you tell him. That was unusual for Bonnie to be so forward, but he welcomed the idea. He smiled and nodded. Sure, why not? Carl gave his blessing, but Jack didn't tell him they were going on the Harley. That would have sounded too much like a pleasure trip instead of business. He went home, changed, and was at her house by 9:30. It was a beautiful morning. They took Highway 36 through Lyons to Estes Park. He flashed his National Parks Pass at the entrance. He had not used it since Em had died. They rode to the overlook spot, right before the turn onto Trail Ridge Road. The overlook seemed to be miles above the roads that led them up there. It provided a beautiful view of the alluvial fan area where a dam broke 20 years earlier, washing giant boulders down the mountain to the valley below. They sat there in silence, taking in the enormous panoramic view. There was a never-ending stream of people, constantly pulling up, taking pictures, then hopping back in the car and moving on to the next photo opportunity. Jack offered, I've got some water in my bike bag. You want something to drink? Bonnie shook her head no, seemingly lost in deep thought. He noticed how strange it was for her to switch emotions so fast. She seemed to be back in her shell again, while he was thoroughly enjoying the outing. Jack watched as another family got out of their car, and he started to notice a pattern. There was always one person in each group that took pictures of the rest of the family. Sometimes it was the same photographer of the group who wouldn't allow the others to even touch their equipment. But most often, it was the wife who handed the point-and-shoot camera to the husband and barked out photo instructions. It became obvious that the one designated picture taker was never included in the photos. Do these families even have a picture of their husbands in their photo collection? Jack wondered. He was about to say something to Bonnie when he noticed her wiping her eyes. She was crying. He didn't know what to say. He wanted to do something like put his arm around her or give her a hug, but the way she was sitting on the edge of the wall made it so awkward to do so. What's wrong? Are you okay? Yes. No, I'm not. I don't know. Can we go somewhere where we can be alone? I know the perfect spot. They rode to an area where there are lots of picnic tables scattered around. As soon as they stopped, Bonnie went to the table farthest from the road and sat down, staring into the woods. Jack followed and debated, do I sit next to her or across from her? Or he decided to go for broke and sat next to her. He reached out and held her hand gently, but she never made eye contact with him. With a gentle voice, he started, Tell me, what's wrong? It was a strange scene as the tears were flowing down her cheeks, but she was smiling at the same time while staring into the woods. There was a long, eerie silence that beckoned patience. She pulled a tissue from her pocket and wiped the tears, temporarily interrupting the steady flow. She continued to dab the tears until the tissue became soaking wet. Jack tried to add some humor. I think that sponge is all filled up. A tiny chuckle escaped her fog before she started crying again. That's my last one. I don't have any more. Jack stood up. I have some in my bag. I'll be right back. He didn't have tissues, but he had some paper towels in the bottom of his bag. Why is she crying? Will she open up to me? When he returned, he divulged Here, they're not the softest, but they're better than your shirt sleeve. Thanks. She continued to wipe her tears and blew her nose with a real good honk, which made her slightly chuckle. Then she got serious and stated, "What I'm about to tell you, you can't repeat it to anybody, ever. Do you promise?" "Yeah, what is it?" Jack was concerned. He readjusted his position next to her and reached for her hand again. "A few years ago, I was engaged to get married to Alex, my college boyfriend. We were perfect for each other. We had the same ambitions, the same dreams. He would start a sentence and I would finish it. We were soulmates, destined for a life of happiness." She stopped talking, as if she had a flashback into time, reliving that painful experience that she was about to reveal. Almost 30 seconds of silence went by before he intervened. And one day, out of nowhere, I felt sick. It wasn't a cold or a virus. It was something deep inside of me that wasn't right. I went to my doctor and she took some blood samples. And a few days later, the doctor's office called me and said they wanted me back in for more tests. When I asked to speak to the doctor, they said she wasn't in, and the additional tests were needed because the first samples were not conclusive. When I asked what not conclusive meant, they gave me the verbal runaround. I knew right away that it wasn't good. He moved his hand within Bonnie's and intertwined his fingers with hers as if to get a better grip and show support for her. He was listening intently. "Go ahead," he offered her, in a reassuring voice, but was afraid of what he was going to hear. She increased her grip with his, as if she needed to hold on. After the second set of results came back, I was sitting in the doctor's office, not in the patient's waiting room, but in her actual office, and staring at a picture of her family on the wall, with the mountains in the background. It was the most beautiful scenery I ever saw, just like what we saw before. Everyone was smiling and the whole family was in the picture. They must have asked someone else to take their picture. You were right. It's such a simple thing to do, to ask someone else to take the picture. Why is it that most people don't do that?" she offered, as if she was trying to change the subject. Jack watched her staring off into the woods, while she was still remembering the scene in that picture. He interrupted her daydream. "What did she say?" "Who?" "The doctor. What did she say about the results of the tests?" Bonnie started slowly, but paused. "She said..." Jack waited, terrified for what those next words would be. Bonnie took a deep breath before she continued. "She said I had ovarian cancer. I already knew it was bad, and as soon as I heard cancer, my mind wandered, and I got lost in the picture hanging on the wall. She was talking about treatments, and I was admiring the pattern of the trees, the formation of the rocks in that picture. It was as if I had jumped into that photo, and while I was there, nothing could bother me. It was a safe place to be." Jack felt like he was intruding into her life and offered, "I'm so sorry." She was shaking her head and added, "That's not the bad part. It gets worse. I was still in a daze when I told Alex. He was hugging me while I told him, and when I said the word cancer, he freaked out. It wasn't an, oh my God, freak out. It was more like he was scared. For the first time in our relationship, his reaction was a selfish one, only thinking of himself. It was as if I was no longer part of his life. He pulled away from me when I needed him the most. I needed a hug, reassurance. I needed someone to hold me so I would feel protected." "What happened?" "He ran to his car and drove off, leaving me standing there, right in the living room, his living room, in his house. I waited for 2 hours, then went home. I called him when I got home and left a message on his answering machine. I did that again the next day, and the day after that. It was almost a week later when there was a knock at my door. It was his brother, asking for the engagement ring back. I stood there in shock. I could see the look in his eyes. His brother stared at me like I had the Ebola virus. I kept the ring and told him that if Alex wanted it, he would have to come and get it himself. The bastard never did. And what about you? How are you? How is... Jack faded off, unable to say the words. The cancer? It's gone, but it continued to haunt me. A year later, I went on a blind date that my sister set up, and when I mentioned that was the first time I had been out on a date since my cancer scare, he dropped me like a hot potato. My sister yelled at me and said I should never have said anything. Can you believe that? And from my own sister. Jack scooted closer to Bonnie, putting his left arm around her, and moved his right hand to hold her left hand, interlocking the fingers again. Well, that's great news. I mean, about the cancer being gone, not about the date and your sister. She looked directly into his eyes. There's more, Jack. This is the part I never told anybody about. He could never imagine what she was about to say next. He regripped his arm around her shoulder and tightened his hand around hers. After being rejected by my boyfriend and 2 other dates, and hearing the way my own sister treated me, I made a choice to change things. There was a long pause, this time more than 30 seconds, and he decided not to say a word and waited for her to say the next sentence. I decided to get even with everybody. I decided to kill myself. Jack could not believe what he had just heard. I started to think about the different ways to do it, and my life fell apart from there. I didn't care anymore about anybody or anything. I had nothing to live for. I had beaten cancer, but the mention of it haunted me in every relationship since. I was so lost and confused, I started doing research on the internet about different ways to kill myself. When I did a search on the word suicide, over 3.5 million hits showed up. I saw all these sites dedicated to suicide prevention, and the more I read, the more I felt sorry for those people who wanted to kill themselves. Then I realized I was one of those people. Jack was in a state of shock. This beautiful young woman was going to kill herself because of the reactions of those around her. She became isolated, lonely, and locked away from seeing a clear path to mental recovery. He was going to kill himself because of the loneliness, but her reasons made his look really stupid. He wanted to tell her about his self-induced depression and his remedy, but hearing about his suicide attempt might only confirm the validity in her thinking. Besides, he couldn't come up with the ending of why he actually didn't do it. He didn't want to bring her into that mess. He needed more from her. So where are you now? I mean, with ending it. Oh, don't worry, Jack. I'm beyond that. I called the suicide prevention hotline, and a woman talked me through it. She made me realize that Alex and his brother, along with the 2 men I dated, had serious problems of their own. I had a bad string of luck lining up these insecure men all in a row. She taught me that all men aren't like that. She convinced me to back up and go down another road, to continue with my life. I became hesitant about doing the dating scene again, and my personal life has sort of been ho-hum, but marching on slowly. It wasn't until recently, when you started to open up to me, that I became more self-aware of changing the path of my boring life. What do you mean? The conversation switched from concern for her, and somehow he was part of her recent changes. We all knew about your depression with losing your wife. Carl had a meeting the day he hired you and told us how brilliant you are and why he was bringing you into the office to help you get back on your feet. Boy, you really were a drag. Not a great influence for my depression, but your creative ideas were incredible. I don't think you said more than 50 words in the first few weeks with us. Jack smiled. Well, you weren't much of a conversationalist either. That's true. I was still in a mental slump. But one day I came to work, and there were flowers on my desk. Not a store-bought arrangement, but these small and beautiful wildflowers that were hand-picked. You know, Jack, when you pick flowers, you need to make a clean cut on the stem rather than just yank them out of the ground. They'll last a lot longer that way. Oh, sorry about that. Anyway, I knew right away they were from you. It was the first time you actually tried to have a conversation with me. I remember you saying something about the high winds and it putting a damper on your plans to go skydiving. That was cute. But there was one day when you came to work and you were a different person. Something changed you overnight. It was as if somebody smacked you in the face and woke you up from your zombie-like existence. The old Jack disappeared, and the new one was breaking out of his shell, being reborn. I could see it. I was so happy for you. I wanted to know what changed you so quickly. Jack chuckled. The change for me was coincidence. If I was 1 minute earlier or later on a particular day, let's just say we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. You know, I opened up to you because you needed someone to help you out of your slump. I not only enjoyed getting to know you, but I needed it as well. Bonnie looked at Jack, deep into his eyes. The expression on her face changed. She had a twinkling in her eyes, and she confessed. The conversations, the flowers, the little innuendos. I needed all of that. You started to give me a reason to be positive again. When Carl put us on that project together, it became my opportunity to break out of my shell. You helped me come alive again. It was the first time in years that I felt important, useful, and needed again. When you took me for my first ride, I was in heaven. The feeling of flying through the mountains like a bird and the rumbling of the motorcycle beneath me was incredible. But the one thing that did more for me than anything else was putting my arms around you during that ride and holding us together as one. I couldn't hold you tight enough. It made me feel whole again, wanted. It was a necessary thing to do to hold on, but it was so personal, so sensual to me to be able to put my arms around you and hug you without it really being a hug. Do you know what I mean? He knew exactly what she meant, and he was lost in the moment as time slowed to a stop. All sound faded, and everything around him seemed to disappear except for her eyes. His stomach had butterflies from the anticipation of what might happen next, and a warm, flushed feeling sent waves throughout his body. Bonnie smiled. Her eyes lit up, and she declared, "It's just like that saying. Life is not measured by the number of breaths we take, but by the moments that take our breath away." Jack felt himself leaning in towards Bonnie in ultra-slow motion. He took her words as an invitation. His eyes danced from her lips to her eyes, and she was at the same dance. She leaned towards him, and they knew they would kiss, but the captivating moment took forever. They both wanted it so badly, and when they were within inches of each other's face, feeling the breath and taking in the scent from each other's presence, it reached the point of no return. They both closed their eyes as their lips met. It was the most electrifying kiss either of them had ever experienced. It was pure rhapsody. Bonnie shifted her arms around Jack, but the awkwardness of sitting on the picnic table was not conducive to a full embrace. He broke the kiss and stood up, lifting Bonnie to meet him. He put his arms around her and pulled her in close, their bodies touching at every point. He kissed Bonnie's upper lip, then her lower one, before they locked full lips on each other. Bonnie moaned with pleasure as Jack pulled her in more tightly against him. Their arms tightened the embrace as their tongues gently found each other. They kissed, they hugged, and they canceled out each other's loneliness. It was a baptizing moment for both of them. They were both born again and returned to the excitement of life. After he dropped Bonnie off at her home, it was important for him to finish that special CD he was making for her with songs that would send her a message. He wanted to give her something that she could listen to that would make her think of him. He had already started a collection, but now the songs would have a better focus on his new awareness of Bonnie. He started with some oldies that really sang the right words. B.J. Thomas, "I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry." Cher's Shoop Shoop song with the line, "If you want to know if he loves you so, it's in his kiss." Simply Red's "Holding Back the Years." Foreigners, "I Want to Know What Love Is." And Anne Murray's "You Needed Me." Each song captured the essence of what they were both going through. When he finished, he made a copy for himself and rode to work after he knew everyone was gone for the day. He drew a little happy face on a sticky note and put it on the CD. He stood it up behind her keyboard on her computer so it would be the first thing she saw in the morning when she sat down. He wished he could watch her listen to it and observe her expressions as she listened to his innermost feelings being sung through the songs. But by tomorrow morning, he would be on his way to Sturgis. End chapter 15.